Welcome to the Global Education Station Presents. I'm Annette Levesque, your host, education and technology strategist, and author of eLearning Gold, the ultimate guide for leaders. In each episode, we explore innovative ideas and best practices in education, connecting with directors, CEOs, authors, and thought leaders. Together, we'll share stories and insights to inspire and engage learners globally. Welcome back, everyone. Today, I'm excited to introduce our guest, Anashay Wright, TEDx speaker, educator, and equity advocate with over 20 years of experience disrupting inequities in K-12 education. Anashay is the founder of Disruptive Partners, where she helps leaders move from awareness to action, creating equitable learning environments for all students. Hello, Anashay.
Hey, how are you doing today?
I am absolutely fabulous, and we are so excited to hear all about Disruptive Partners and your journey in education and how this whole thing was founded. So maybe you could get started by letting us know what Disruptive Partners is and what your role is.
Yeah. First of all, thank you so much for having me. You look amazing, absolutely amazing. And I am so glad to be here. Thank you for your service leadership in this space. So I want to start off by saying that Disruptive Partners is just that. We partner with districts, system leaders, companies, organizations to disrupt the status quo in education. More specifically, public education with a focus on K 12. How do we do that? We're an innovation firm. We're an education consulting and innovation firm. The education consulting is your traditional helping school leaders, system leaders with instructional, um, creating inclusive learning environments for both educators and kids, right? Making everybody feel welcome and ensuring every child learns. That's the instructional component of it. I would say the innovation is more of my work as an AI facilitator. I have a signature course report called AI as an Ally: 7 Ways to Disrupt Education for Good. So that's what we do. We help usher innovation in responsible ways to the public education sector, as well as ensuring that we create inclusive instructional environments, which is a bunch of jargon for you better make sure everybody's learning. You better make sure everybody feels welcome, right? And you better make sure you prepare today's generation for jobs of the future.
I like that. And I like when I hear you say inclusive environments for students, which we're all familiar with, but also educators. Tell me more
Yes.
about that.
Yeah, you can't. Oh, so interesting. Like we often talk about kids being disconnected and disengaged, right, in the student learning environment. But a lot of times educators see that practice from the adult learning environment, right? So the more you can make an educator feel inclusive, every PD with me starts with inspiring our educators. It starts with us unpacking what's your educator DNA, like who is the human behind the teaching, right? And so we elevate the humanity of our educators so that they can in turn do the same for kids, right? And so that's how you align instruction, right? You understand what kids want for themselves, their hopes and dreams, and you align your instructional resources to that. And so we have to do the same for our educators who says, like, let's just be honest, right? When the pandemic hit, educators became frontline workers. They really did, right along with the healthcare industry. And so now we're looking at burnout. We're looking at underappreciated sector, right? Under resourced. And so I believe if you center the humanity of our educators in the experience, right, they in turn will center the humanity of our kids in theirs.
And who, Anashay, is the human behind you as an educator?
Oh man, you are so good. No one ever asked me that. Yeah, my mom, who I call into this space today, I call Brenda Laverne Wyatt, my mother, my ancestor, into this space. You know, my mom taught me at the age of 12 to know my power, right? She wrote a poem I'll never forget, girl. It was called Rules, Who Are They Made For? Rules, Who Are They Made For? She would say poor folks, rich folks, Rich white out of sight or rich black who say get back. I've got mine. Now you get yours. Who are rules made for? And my mom made me stand up at 12 years old and memorize that because she wanted me to understand the power of questioning, right? Questioning those in authority, not attacking, but questioning those in authority and questioning anything that dehumanizes anyone, especially those people that look like me. And so my mother helped me not to know my power, but how to harness it in a way that brings people together. Unfortunately, just a year after I graduated from high school, my mom succumbed to cancer and she transcended at the age of 39. But her energy lives on through me.
I can see that. I can see that light from her. That's such a powerful story. Actually, I got goosebumps a little bit when you said to me, your mom and rules are made for. I can't repeat what you said as well as what you said it, but it was really good. I really liked it.
Thank
Um,
you.
how can schools, communities involved in education and schools begin the transformation and addressing creating inclusive learning? So where do they start from, the point of, is it the gathering of data? How do we evaluate whether or not we're even doing that when you're at point A?
Oh yeah. For me, I call it the new ABCs. I say number one, leveraging AI as an ally, right? Leveraging technology tools like AI. B for bridges, building better bridges amongst colleagues and teams first, across generations. And C for connections. Once you build bridges with your colleagues internally, how do you communicate to build better connections with those you serve, not save? And through all of those ABCs, the through line is a belief shift, right? Do you believe in the power of children and the promise of children, or do you only see their deficits and what they can't do, right? Do you
Mhm.
know your colleagues in a very intimate and human way so that they bring their gifts and talents into the educational sector and leverage that to connect with kids? And finally, do you fear innovation, right? What's your belief about innovation? What's your belief about how we can leverage it for good? And what do you believe will happen if you don't understand it at all? So I call it the new ABCs. You better understand AI, whether you like it or not. You better build bridges with those that work with you. Um, and then see connections. How do you connect and communicate in ways that bring people together? And so that's how we measure it, right? And concretely, I look at a leader like, does a leader have a clear engagement system in place, right? Do you have regular touch points to listen and learn from parents and students, right? Do you do these listening sessions in schools, right? Where you actually take the data, you transcribe the information, and you actually align your resources to what parents and kids have consistently told you that we want for ourselves, right? Do you believe that all parents are broke, right? Or do you believe that some parents are woke and educated and actually make middle, incomes, middle to upper incomes, right? Like, it's what do you believe? What is the stories you've been told and sold? And which ones need to be disrupted for good? And so that's where we really get in as the mind goes and as your heart goes. Whatever you believe about those you serve is how you will perform and show up. And that is where we can measure the belief shift, right? If you believe kids can learn, you teach high quality instruction. Boop.
So in your ABCs, where we're looking at AI, what role do you see that technology and AI playing in reshaping education, and especially in terms of bridging equity gaps? And do you have some examples you want to share?
Girl, oh my gosh. So yeah, I'm speaking in California this weekend about All In for Equity conference with Monterey Schools, um, Monterey District. But I'm actually speaking on how do we move equity forward, right? Leveraging AI as an ally. And I can tell you right now, I leveraged AI in 2019 for myself and then brought it into the school system. I was diagnosed with adult ADHD as a neurodiverse leader, right? We talk about neurodiverse learners, but I'm a neurodiverse leader. And it was in very dominant Eurocentric spaces, right? Where nothing was real unless it was written down. It had to be in a one pager, a Google Doc, a Google Deck. with facilitation notes, right? And if it was not linear, documented, and straight, right, it wasn't real. Well, as a Black woman, one thing about our community are we are great orators, we are great speakers. Think about the great Dr. King, right? We could speak good, but imagine if someone said, "All right, Dr. King, we hear you, but go on and put that in a one pager." How do you embody, right, the essence, right? So I knew that I had to give my teams, that I managed, I had to give my leaders something codified, right? But my brilliance did not work in that way. And I found my first AI tool and I spoke my genius in a speech to text tool. And I didn't even know I was as smart as I was because people kept telling me what was wrong with my communication. And for the first time, technology showed me what was right. And so I then took that when I was building a intervention program at an alternative school for middle school and high schoolers. I saw kids who were below grade level. They were failing at least two classes, math and literacy. They had been written up about 6 to 7 times per month, and their attendance was right around 60%. And one day I brought them around to do some learning, and I told them that they were going to have to write a paper. And you should see their brains. It was like a tornado. We say brainstorming. Well, that's what happens in the brain, right? When you hear somebody tell you to do something, your amygdala is like, oh my God, how do I capture all these amazing ideas? And I said, pause and speak your genius into this tool. Well, I was able to use the tool as an assistive device because they had individualized education plans. They were legally allowed to use assistive devices. No one knew what it was, though. And honey, I used that Otter AI as an ally, and the rest is history. Kids went from being able to write 1 to 2 sentences to a whole paper. And then they were able to take that and use it, organize it into a presentation. And they were able to make the case for changes in their lives and education that no one would have ever known. And in 45 days, those kids increased a grade level and a half in literacy. They averaged attendance at about 90%, and they had zero referrals. I disrupted the school to prison pipeline, and I leveraged AI
You
to work for me.
disrupted that school.
Oh, baby, we did it. And the rest is history. People caught wind of it. And so now I speak on panels and I create a space for educators to simply play with my 10 allies. These are my 10 trusted tools that I've vetted over the last 5 years. And I just let them play with it, which is my message to all the district leaders. Like, don't force it down people's throat. Let them play and determine how they can use it for good. And so I
Mhm.
create the space to do that.
And now we're seeing new technologies that can really help with that because as you're talking about shifting from, hey, I have to write this huge essay and put it down on paper and it feeling really overwhelming, like a large task, to using assistive technologies like Otter AI that you were using. It's interesting during the pandemic, just after when I was writing my book, I started off and I was learning, I'd put together chapters for universities and done a lot of writing, but that was my first time assembling a complete, all of these best practices from 20 years as I was seeing schools launching these quick start e-learning programs with no strategic plan and making, because there wasn't a lot of documentation to go by on building programs, making, you know, mistakes that we made 20 years ago starting because there's nothing out there.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought I've got to get all these ideas, to try to help and put them together in the book. And I used to sit down and I would be lucky if I wrote, 500 to 800 words a day. Like that was a huge achievement. And then I would find, our creative brains are inspired sometimes when we're not working, when you're on a walk, when you're, doing some
Yes.
home tasks, you don't have your computer. And I would make a note and say, okay, I need to write about that later. But inevitably, whenever I sat down, at the time you're thinking these thoughts, you feel so inspired. You have all these ideas, you're really energized. Then you go to sit and write it the next morning or 4 hours later. It was like, I've got 4 sentences coming up. So I started using drag and dictate. So similar to the Otter AI,
Yeah.
where you would dictate in and it starts to evolve based on the things you correct in your speech patterns. They use it in schools as well. And I would just, spur out all of these ideas about, I'd hear something on a podcast, something going wrong in a school, and I'd be like, oh, they need to know this. And I would spew it out. And then the problem became, though, I can be really wordy. So it's like I've got all of these ideas, and now I've got to hone it down. So I went from 800 words a day to several thousand words a day. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, I've got to hone this down now into knowledge, into usable knowledge for the book. Unfortunately, Anashay, when I was doing this, ChatGPT did not exist for helping you refine things. But now I was
Yeah.
like, thank you so much for launching after my book is done. But now I can take all of these lovely dictated ideas, plunk it into ChatGPT and say, I need this to be only 1,500 words. Give me what you got, basically, and then
Yep.
see what it suggests and help me refine it. What do you think about that?
I think you have nailed the bigger headline, which is systematizing, right? You nailed it. Now you have this overabundance of content, right? That never makes it out to the world, right? Because you're finally. I think the first part is just therapy, girl, like getting it off your brain. I designed a GPT called Anashay's Second Brain, and it's where everything goes, right? It's where everything goes. I pull out my phone if I'm walking, whatever. I just say it, and it becomes my second brain, and I feel released and I feel free. And then I go back to that knowledge, right? Once I need it. So you nailed it, right? It's you got to have a system. And I tell my students and my clients, OHIO, only handle it once. When you sit down, think of your 4 steps in advance. What's your end game? And don't you move anywhere, right? Until you do that, right? And so, to your point, you have to systematize it. You have to be clear on the job to be done, right? How are you using it and for what purpose before you sit down? So, AI doesn't work, right? I hire AI tools like I hire people. If I'm not clear on the job to be done, I don't fool with it, right? And so that's why I've stuck with my trusty tools that I vetted, calibrated. I know the safety. Chat GPT is also the black hole, right? If you don't have a paid subscription, right? It's the black box of knowledge,
Mhm.
right? So, I design my tools for safety, and I don't share that with anybody unless it's a client, if I'm designing something for a client. So, yeah, I think long story short, yes, yes, and yes, you nailed it.
It's interesting when you say that ChatGPT is the black hole. I was recently at a summit in the UK, and we had this whole discussion, and there was a lot of strength of opinion that the way OpenAI was running, that ChatGPT had been democratized, and so it was available to everyone. And I was like, wait a minute, we need to remember this is proprietary. And it's great to, often technologies, when they come out, they make themselves freely available or a version freely available to the masses for working. But this is now something that's becoming as integral to working and living during a
Yep.
day as like in a remote control for your car, practically. Like you
Yeah.
can't put that jack back in the box. What happens if they change the terms of which they may decide to deliver it? And lo and behold, this week in the news, I see that they are reconsidering how and what versions are going to be delivered for free. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Um, I'm going to say something that people didn't think about. When people ask me, Anashay, why is such a game changer for you, me personally? Um, we talked a lot about closing the racial wealth gap. We talked a lot about that. When OpenAI released ChatGPT, I was like, did they do this on purpose? Like, so many in my community struggle with worship of the written word. That is a Eurocentric ideology, right? And people have to understand the enslavement of humans. One of the number one things they did to keep them enslaved was limit access to reading, writing, and literacy, right? Access to information, access to knowledge and resources. So when I saw it released, I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, y'all. And so for me, it really became this movement of how do I ensure those who need it the most understand how to leverage it to write a grant for your church, right? We've been locked out of venture capital funding. We've been locked out of, and when I say we, not just the African American and Latino y Latina Latinx communities, but poor communities of all races, right? Of all races, right? We have not had that access. And so I say, game on, right? You have now released the biggest game changer in this society in the United States that worships the written word policy. right, in education. If it's not written down, it's not real. Writing student referrals, writing curriculum. All the power is in the written word. And you're actually putting it in the hands of a Black woman in metro Atlanta that grew up poor. Child, I was like a junkie going through hundreds of tools, trying them out because I want to be able to bring it back to my community, so that we're not all woke and broke, right? We're loud and we talking and we have this great passion in our hearts, but then it comes time to generate revenue and we don't even know how to do it. So
Mhm.
I salute open AI for whatever reason it was. It leveled the playing field in a way that I know my community still doesn't even understand.
Mhm. It's leveled it for now as long as there continues to be open and equitable access to these tools, right, as
Yeah.
they evolve, and because we've seen other fabulous tools come about, not to the extent and not as disruptive. I love disruptive since, I'm with you at
The
Disruptive
disruptor.
Partners, but
Yeah.
I'm with a disruptor, exactly. Not to the extent, but let's say WhatsApp, for instance, was a really popular free tool
Mm-hmm.
that developing countries, many areas use for
Mm-hmm.
actually. When I travel, there's many areas that's all they're using is WhatsApp to communicate instead of the phone. That was freely available, and then it slowly slid into it was purchased by Meta,
Yeah.
and now it's still supposed to be private, but the business accounts aren't so private. So there's a little bit of a decline, right, in
Yeah.
what that access looks like. So I guess I'm hoping that because this is this you're right. I mean, this tool is it. It's like it feels like when the internet launched, for Pete's sake.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping it still remains readily available to all learners, all peoples in all countries. You can use it from your phone. We can
Mm-hmm.
it really, and I love what you said about, enslaving people. When you enslave people, you limit their access to the reading and that is so powerful.
Thank you so much for that. And it's the honest to goodness truth, sis. Like I will tell you this. I don't do for me personally, I don't live in the land of hypotheticals, right? Like hypothetically, anything could happen tomorrow. And I think if I
True.
live in that space, it will be renting space in my head that I don't have space for it to rent. Right. And I can't
Hmm.
live in fear. But what I will say is learn how to leverage it while you have it. Right. You learn how to
Right.
leverage it while you have it. I think also embracing, like, people don't understand the definition. Disruptive innovation is a term out of Harvard. Okay, a term out of Harvard. Disruptive innovation is this idea that you don't become a leader or more competitive by gutting out a system, right? Or going with your pitchfork and you learn the
Right.
system and you build a better one. You build a better solution. And disruptors are master listeners. They listen to what people want and they align their solutions to that. Disrupting means to interrupt the current state of affairs, right? So we need to embrace disruption because every competitive industry is disruptive. And when you're not competitive, what's the number one line they say when a company folds? They say, but we always did it that way, right before they fold, right? So education is long overdue for disruption, long overdue. And what you can bet your by golly wow is that whatever the latest and greatest is, education is going to spend money on it. It is a
Hmm.
multi-trillion-dollar industry, right? That ain't going nowhere. So for my sector, it's like, yeah, greatest and latest is going to come out, and the K-12 system is going to continue to spend their money on the latest and greatest. The question is, will they create the professional development systems so that people can actually leverage it and use it?
Exactly. And right now, when I talk to education leaders, almost everyone indicates the teacher shortages being a huge issue right now, in providing professional learning and providing, they're saying, it's almost impossible for us to release teachers for time to engage in that learning that they need. And we're looking at other strategies to try to make ongoing learning part of the culture in a school. You
Yep.
work with educators to prepare students for the careers of tomorrow. So, what are some of the critical skills students need that you think students need in the digital age? And how can educators foster these skills? Like, have they changed now that we have AI?
You know what? Yeah, I actually built a career pathway program for a major school district. Shout out to Jeffco County Public Schools to do just that, right? To prepare kids for high demand careers of the future, right? So let's not play games, right? Like, we understand lower earning wages and we'll always need people for some of those roles, right? And if a kid chooses to do it, we better set them up to do it well. But when you think about high demand careers of the future, just close your eyes and visualize any CEO of a Fortune 500 company. Critical thinking, the ability to communicate and engage in inspiring ways, right? The ability to simplify and engage and inspire people, right? So you have the ability to speak, the ability, those interpersonal skills, critical thinking skills, problem solving skills, right? And I would say leadership skills. And people always cringe at the leadership. Well, is everybody a leader? I'm like, okay, let's be real. Every kid has to get up and lead themselves to their toothbrush, lead themselves to the bus, lead themselves. You see where I'm going with this? You have to be a leader of your own
Hmm.
behavior. There is not one place in life where you're not either a self leader, a leader of projects, or a leader of others. So leadership
Hmm.
has to be at the crux of it, right? Like giving kids this opportunity to own and lead their learning, right? Do you want to write your paper down? Do you want to speak it into a tool, right? Do you want to do a combination of the both? Do you want to use a Google Doc? Do you want to use a slides presentation? How do you want to, craft a compelling story and share it with others? So when we talk about critical skills of the future, the reason why I cringe at the K-12 system is it would require teachers and leaders to cede power, right? You
Hmm.
don't get to dictate how a kid demonstrates their genius. Your job
Hmm.
is to create the space and facilitate it. So, as my 18-year-old son who speaks with me, he travels and does a lot of keynotes with me. Shout out to 𝗘𝘅𝗽𝗃. I love you. Shout out to 𝗘𝘅𝗽𝗃. I love my children. When we speak, my son and I looks teachers in their eye and tells them just like this. As with every great athlete, they have a great coach. And so, what every K-12 student doesn't need, they don't need another teacher. They need an education coach. They need someone to guide them, to inspire them, to create space and opportunity, to teach them well and let them lead their way. And so I'm looking every educator in the eye and saying, how are you creating space for students to lead and own their academic experience, to demonstrate their learning? How are you creating
Hmm.
an inclusive culture for every child to demonstrate the brilliance that they were born with in beautiful, diverse ways?
Hmm. I really love that idea of student driven learning. And it's something we've been talking a lot in terms of when we talk about engagement, right? How to engage
Mhm.
students. And it may not be just virtual learning anymore because since the pandemic, a lot of people have virtual learning fatigue, and you see more people offering only if it's the only option, if there's geographical
Mhm.
factors or reasons why we need to be in it. But I still love the hybrid learning model approach, where you can still have materials online in the classroom that can be accessible
Yeah.
anytime, and you can pair that with face to face learning. But the nature of engagement changes. And when we look at, teachers that used to always in classrooms before be here's your assignment, this is what you need to do. If you were lucky and you had a nice teacher, you had some topic options, and that might be about it, right? But now it seems like, there's an opportunity for the role of the teacher to shift a little bit more to be more of a facilitator for learning.
Yes.
And so it's, here's what we need to learn, and here's what would you like to do? How could you show it? And how can you create a project or do that paper and make it relevant to something happening in your life so it has meaning for you? Because when students know that if they feel like teachers are using just AI tools for marking and there's nobody at the other end of these papers and in creating their assignments, they need to make the connection with the teacher, and they need to be able to produce something that's relevant. When I did my master's, I wrote all of my papers about best practices for virtual learning and virtual learning schools so we could use it in our own school. I don't want to write a paper as an adult that just for the sake of writing a paper. And
Right.
so I love that
That's right.
student driven learning
Yep.
and
Yep.
shifting
That's what
towards it.
Yep, student driven. And if you use in the spirit of being an elementary, middle, and high school teacher, if you use a synonym for student driven, it's student led, right? Student led learning, which is a form of the word leadership, right?
Mhm.
Students are driving their success, right? They're leading their pathway to success. And I love what you said. I just wrote it down. How do we ensure kids are given the task and the assignment of writing papers with purpose, right? A paper, you're not writing a paper today for mastery. You're writing it because it's going to become the introduction to your book. That's different, right? So we're not asking teachers
Mhm.
to make this shift in another curriculum. We're asking you to shift in how you deliver the existing content in empowering ways, right? So that's the thing. Like, I love that you said that. I wrote that down. Papers and assignments with purpose, right? Empowerment.
Mhm.
That's what
Mhm.
that's important. I had to write that down.
I think you said it better with papers with purpose. That sounds like a nice coined catchphrase that you just created. But I think, though, papers with purpose as well, that also solves or it helps to resolve some of the issues coming up when they're looking at assessment and evaluation. And there's so many concerns about plagiarism and other issues with AI. If you're not just delivering a standard one size box fits all lesson, to students, if it is a paper with purpose, you're going to, students want to engage that. They're going to want to produce that for you. They're going to be excited and feel moved to do that. And you're going to know that's an original paper when you're reading it.
You know what? That's another part of it. The question when we talk about plagiarism, and I can't wait to get the transcript for this podcast because it's like once I hear it back, it's going to be so good. My question then becomes, well, what's the end game here? Plagiarism is so tactical and subpar. Like, the real question is, can a kid internalize and turn around and present what they have learned? Can they persuade others to get behind a thought or idea? Can a kid write a paper in a way that they can stand in front of you without reading the facilitation notes and really get people to believe in this idea, this concept, or this thing that they are trying to either inform you of, persuade you of, right? Inspire or entertain you about. So that's my thing is, have we forgotten like plagiarism is another compliance, checking the box. Oh, you plagiarize. No, do you own your knowledge? My mama raised me, when you write a poem, you don't own it until you can speak it off the dome. And in our community, this is why we have great lyricists, freestylers, rappers. We can stand in front of you and quote scriptures and bars because our brain is that powerful, which
Mhm.
means I have to look at the person in a like questionable way. Like if you have to over rely on facilitation notes, what does that say about you? You haven't internalized it,
Mhm.
right? So I think the question is, what are you assigning things for and for what purpose and what end game? For compliance or ownership of the knowledge,
Mhm.
you know?
Absolutely. I love that. And I think more and more, the more we automate, the more technology we see, the more we're really going to have to start really reflecting and considering on the purpose of those objectives. And I think disrupting some of them too, in that do we still
Yeah,
really need, as you said, sometimes we do things in schools because this is the way it's always been
always
done.
been done.
When I was pioneering e-learning, 20 years ago, it didn't exist. It wasn't like now. And there wasn't a purpose necessarily for e learning other than the one I could see, which was, extending classes, types of classes that perhaps young women didn't, not all young women wanted to take math,
Mhm,
science, and chemistry. Maybe they wanted to take advanced psychology or a different type of course, or young men.
mhm.
I don't want to genderize it, but
Right.
extending the classroom, allowing students a different pace and a different place if they needed it. So 20 years ago, it was about that. But it was disruptive. Let me tell you, launching that. It was a
Exactly.
really, really, yes, it was a very, very hard sell. But today, it's now given us opportunities to look at how can we be more inclusive and how can we provide diverse learning experiences in the classroom and allow students to own them. So that's
Yeah, it's
thank
like
you
a
so
new
much for that
DEI.
idea.
Yeah, it's a new DEI. We talked about diversity. We limited ourselves to racial diversity, like no thinking diversity, right? Like, how about that? Right? How about so I just, my heart goes out for the kids when I look at alternative schools, alternative middle and high schools, some of the most brilliant minds, you know, I believe that the education system tries to control bodies with compliance when they can't engage minds. I really believe
Wow.
that. And you see it happen to boys disproportionately, black, brown, and white boys, right? You see it disproportionately happen to boys. And of course, in our communities, and I'll tell anybody, you show me a disruptive child, I'll show you a genius. And that's the honest to God truth. And so we've got to change our beliefs about kids. It's like, what do you believe about the innovators, the disruptors, right? The next generation. What are you telling yourself? Because the story I'm telling myself at Disruptive Partners is that they are joyful, that they are peaceful, and that they are powerful beyond measure if we align our instructional resources and our beliefs with their brilliance. And I won't ever waver on that.
You are so insightful. I want to shift gears a little bit as we're just about wrapping up. And I want to ask you what is, and you can take a moment to think about it, but what do you think is one book that every educator right now should either read or have read, or really something powerful you've read that you'd love to share?
I'm going to be biased and say to read the book my son and I wrote called Bridging the Gap and Building New Tables. It releases soon, but it is a conversation between a Black mother, educator, and son. And it explicitly serves as a blueprint for how adults can engage with kids to set them up for the future. So that would be my biased first pick. And then my neck and neck for first place would be Dr. Jamila Dugan's Street Data and Dr. Goli Muhammad's Cultivating Genius. Um, I think those two books were game changing. These are two amazing, brilliant women that I've had the honor of knowing personally. But Cultivating the Genius of Every Child, oh my God, like it changed it spoke to my soul when I saw that. And then Street Data, right? This idea and concept of that untapped data um, that we haven't talked about. I think those two books are a great combination of inspiration, but clear, actionable frameworks.
I love that. I'm going to pick them up. And where can we get your book
Oh, I will
when it
absolutely
comes
be
out?
sharing. Yeah, I'll be sharing the pre-sale link with you. And they can just click on it and order their copy. It's an adult picture book and it's in spoken words. So it's kind of like your new Dr. Seuss type book, right? Where you can read it before every meeting or anything where you're interested in better connecting with kids.
Okay, we can include that in the show notes for sure, because I'm sure everybody listening is definitely going to want to. Just speaking with you for 30 minutes, I'm thinking, okay, I want more. So definitely going to pick up the book. As a last question before we wrap up, Anashay, what have I not asked you that you want to make sure people know about, that you
Mm,
think people should know about?
that's a good one. What do I think everyone should know about? Um, I would love for you to know about my life as a teacher before Disruptive Partners.
Tell me.
So prior to launching Disruptive Partners, I transitioned into the K-12 sector as a third grade elementary teacher who knew nothing about teaching. Nothing. I took a test and I passed it and I got in the classroom. And I would hear people talk about unpacking standards. I was like, I'm just going to unpack my car. Guided reading. I was like, I don't know what that is. It's just totally out there. I was like, whatever. Um, but by the end of my first year, 100% of my students passed the state assessment in reading and ELA. 90% passed math in a Title I predominantly Black school, um, and 100% were brilliant. And I will say so much so that of that 92% that passed math in my third grade class, 42% exceeded state standards. And so we got through instruction so quickly once I aligned it to their hopes and dreams that by March we were done and we wrote an album called The New Nerds. and you can find us on YouTube, right? It's like, oh, but we made a whole album. That's how much free time we had, right? To really and we use music to reinforce what we taught. Like we had a song called "Watch Me Stop That Run On," right? And that those kids, my third graders now, we did a rap group. We reached thousands of kids. We were nominated for a Georgia Music Award, right? And they are all now my babies in their 20s. So now I have former students, right? And their children are like my grandbabies and my, my god babies and all that good stuff. So I just say to you, the power of what I did with kids in classrooms for 6 years um, truly speaks to who I am today. And without those children, without my new nerds, that's what they were called, KNERDS, knowledgeable, educated, relentlessly driven scholars. Brainwash those babies for 180 days to believe in themselves. And that is the evidence of what you see in Disruptive Partners today and in my role as a mother.
We are so lucky to that you took that journey, and I'm sure all of your babies in their 20s are so grateful and thankful to have had an experience with you as an instructor because it really sounds like an experience, right?
Yeah.
And I'm so thankful that you agreed to come and share your insights and your wisdom with us today. It was so lovely to meet you, and I can't wait to follow you and to hear more. So thank you so much.
Again, thank you for creating this platform and welcoming disruptors of good like myself. Thank you.